In the sleepy village of St. Mary Mead, a cunning thief lurks, stealing jewels and hiding smuggled treasures under the nose of sweet old Miss Marple. But don't be fooled. Her sharp eyes see everything. When a shadowy mastermind called the Maestro threatens her home, Miss Marple sets clever traps, unravels secrets, and chases clues from cosy cottages to a dazzling London auction. Can this knitting grandma outsmart a criminal genius before he strikes again? Danger's close, and time's running out. Chapter 1. The Whisper in St. Mary Mead. The village of St. Mary Mead lay quiet under a grey autumn sky, its narrow streets lined with cosy cottages and tidy gardens. Leaves red and gold drifted to the ground, crunching under the boots of villagers hurrying to the market or the post office. In her small, rose-covered cottage, Miss Jane Marple sat by the window, her fingers busy with knitting needles. A pale blue scarf grew slowly in her lap, but her sharp eyes weren't on the wool. They were fixed on the street outside, where something unusual caught her attention. A stranger stood near the post office, his dark overcoat too fancy for the village. His hat was pulled low, shading his face, and he moved with a purpose that didn't fit the lazy rhythm of St. Mary Mead. Most villagers shuffled or strolled, chatting with neighbours or waving to friends. This man didn't. He lingered watching the comings and goings, his hands in his pockets, his head turning slightly to track a delivery boy on a bicycle. Miss Marple's fingers paused mid-stitch. "Now, who might you be?" she murmured to herself, her voice soft as the rustle of leaves. St. Mary Mead was a place where everyone knew everyone else. A new face stood out like a sore thumb, and Miss Marple, with her knack for noticing things, rarely missed one. She'd lived here all her life, and though she seemed like just a sweet old lady with a love for knitting and gardening, her mind was as sharp as a tack. She saw patterns in people's actions the way others saw shapes in clouds. To her, a glance, a hesitation, or a too quick smile could tell a story. And this stranger, with his careful steps and watchful eyes, was telling her something wasn't right. She leaned closer to the window, her glasses glinting in the dim light. The man checked his watch, then crossed the street, pausing by the bakery where Mrs. Baker was setting out fresh loaves. He didn't go in. Instead, he stood there, pretending to read a notice on the community board. But Miss Marple saw his eyes dart toward the post office again, where Mrs. Price, the postmistress, was sorting letters behind the counter. "He's waiting for something," Miss Marple whispered, her needles clicking again. Or someone. The clock on her mantel ticked toward noon. Miss Marple set her knitting aside and stood, smoothing her skirt. She'd planned to visit the vicarage for tea that afternoon, but now she had a reason to take a walk sooner. If this stranger was up to no good, she'd find out. Not by confronting him. That wasn't her way. Miss Marple worked quietly, like a spider spinning a web, catching truths in the threads of everyday life. She pulled on her coat, a sensible grey one, and picked up her hat, a plain thing with a small flower on the brim. Then she stepped outside, locking her door behind her. The air was crisp, smelling of damp earth and wood smoke. Miss Marple walked, slowly, her cane tapping the cobblestones, though she didn't really need it. It was part of her disguise, making her look frail and harmless. Villagers smiled as she passed, calling out greetings. "Morning, Miss Marple," said Tommy the butcher's boy, as he pedalled by with a basket of sausages. "Fine day, isn't it?" Miss Marple nodded, her eyes crinkling. "Lovely, Tommy. Mind the puddles." But her thoughts were on the stranger, who was now nowhere in sight. She reached the post office and pushed open the door. A bell jingling above her, Mrs. Price looked up from her counter, her round face flushed from sorting. "Oh, Miss Marple, here for your stamps?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. Miss Marple smiled. "Not today, dear. Just thought I'd pop in and see how you're getting on." She glanced around, taking in the stacks of envelopes and parcels. The post office was the heart of village gossip, and Mrs. Price loved to chat. If anyone had noticed the stranger, it would be her. As Mrs. Price rattled on about the weather and the new vicar's sermon, Miss Marple listened patiently, her eyes scanning the room. A pile of letters caught her attention, one with an odd address, scrawled in spidery ink. "The Maestro, Willow Cottage." Willow Cottage was on the edge of the village, a run-down place no one had lived in for years. Or so everyone thought. Miss Marple tilted her head. "That's a curious name," she said, nodding toward the letter. "The Maestro. Sounds like a musician, doesn't it?" Mrs. Price chuckled, picking up the letter. "Fancy, isn't it? Came in yesterday. I don't know who's at Willow Cottage, but someone's there. I've seen lights flickering at night, and once a car parked out front. Big black thing, not from around here." Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her face stayed calm. "How interesting," she said. "Perhaps a new neighbour. We must make them feel welcome." Mrs. Price nodded, already moving on to another topic, but Miss Marple's mind was racing. She left the post office and turned toward the vicarage, her thoughts spinning. The Maestro. Willow Cottage. The stranger in the overcoat. They were pieces of a puzzle, and though she didn't know the picture yet, she felt its edges forming. As she walked, she passed the village green, where children played tag and dogs, chased sticks. The stranger was there again, sitting on a bench, a newspaper open in his lap. He wasn't reading it. His eyes followed her just for a moment before he looked away. Miss Marple's lips twitched. "You're not as clever as you think," she thought. "I see you." At the vicarage, tea was served in the cosy parlour, with its chintz curtains and crackling fire. The vicar's wife, Mrs. Clement, poured from a chipped teapot, while Dolly Bantry, Miss Marple's old friend, helped herself to a scone. The talk was light. Village fetes, knitting circles, the price of eggs. But Miss Marple steered it gently toward Willow Cottage. "Have you noticed anyone new there?" she asked, sipping her tea. Mrs. Clement frowned. "Now that you mention it, I did see smoke from the chimney last week. I thought it was empty, though." Dolly, always eager for a story, leaned forward. "A mystery! Maybe it's a runaway prince or a spy." She laughed, but Miss Marple didn't. She set her cup down. "Or someone who doesn't want to be known," she said quietly. The room went still for a moment. Then Dolly waved a hand. "Oh, Jane, you and your imagination. Next, you'll say there's a murderer in St. Mary Mead." Mrs. Clement giggled, but Miss Marple's eyes stayed thoughtful. She didn't believe in murderers yet, but she believed in secrets. And secrets, in her experience, led to trouble. Back home, Miss Marple lit a lamp and settled into her armchair. The village was settling too, its lights winking out as night fell. She picked up her knitting but didn't knit. Instead, she stared at the fire, her mind sorting facts like cards. The stranger's careful movements, the letter to the maestro, the lights at Willow Cottage, they pointed to something bigger than village gossip. She thought of her nephew, Raymond West, a writer in London with friends in high places. He might know something about strange names or mysterious cottages. She'd write to him tomorrow. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Miss Marple rose and peered through the curtains. The street was empty, but she felt a prickle at the back of her neck, like someone was watching. She closed the curtains and sat down again, her knitting untouched. "People show themselves in their habits," she said aloud, her voice firm, "and I'll find out yours, whoever you are." The next morning she woke early, the sky still pink with dawn. She made tea and sat at her kitchen table, writing a letter to Raymond. She kept it simple, describing the stranger and the letter to the maestro, asking if he'd heard of anything odd in London, smugglers, thieves, or men with fancy nicknames. She sealed the envelope and walked to the post office, dropping it in the box. Mrs. Price was there, sorting as usual. "Another letter already, Miss Marple?" she teased. Miss Marple smiled. "Just keeping in touch, dear." On her way back, she took a longer route, passing Willow Cottage. It looked empty in the daylight, its windows dark, its garden a tangle of weeds, but a faint path led from the gate to a shed at the back, and there, half hidden by ivy, were wooden crates stacked high. Their sides were marked with foreign stamps, French, Italian, maybe German. Miss Marple's heart skipped. Crates like that didn't belong in St. Mary Mead. They belonged in ports or warehouses, places where things were bought and sold in secret. She didn't linger. The stranger might be watching, and she wasn't ready to show her hand. Back home, she made a note of the crate markings in her little black book, where she kept all her observations. Then she waited. Raymond's reply came 2 days later, faster than she'd expected. His letter was short but serious. "Aunt Jane," he wrote, "those crate markings match ones used by smugglers moving rare goods. Art, jewels, old books. Be careful. I'm asking around, but this sounds dangerous." Miss Marple read the letter twice, her lips pressed tight. Smugglers in St. Mary Mead. It was bold, even reckless. Whoever the maestro was, he wasn't just passing through. He was setting up shop, right under the village's nose. She folded the letter and tucked it away. Raymond meant well, but she didn't need warnings. She needed answers, and she'd get them, one quiet step at a time. That afternoon she went to the village fete, a cheerful affair with stalls selling jam and knitted socks. The stranger was there, calling himself Mr. Victor Lang now, chatting with the vicar about old churches. He was smooth, his smile bright, but Miss Marple saw the way his eyes flicked to the crowd, always watching. She bought a jar of marmalade and stood nearby, listening. Lang's voice was polished, his stories full of far-off places, but he dodged questions about where he lived or why he was here. A man with no past, Miss Marple thought, or one he's hiding. She didn't speak to him. Instead she watched, noting who he talked to, who he avoided. When he left the fete, he headed toward Willow Cottage, his steps quick. Miss Marple followed at a distance, her cane tapping softly. She stopped at the edge of the village, where the road turned to dirt. Lang disappeared into the cottage, and a moment later a light flickered in an upstairs window. She nodded to herself. So that's your hideout, she thought. But what are you hiding? Back home, she sat by the fire, her knitting in her lap. The village was quiet again, but Miss Marple felt a storm coming. The maestro, the crates, the stranger, they were part of something big, something dangerous. She wasn't afraid. She'd faced puzzles before, and she'd solve this one too. Her needles clicked, the scarf growing longer. Outside the wind whispered secrets, and Miss Marple listened, ready for whatever came next. Chapter 2. The Maestro's Shadow. The morning sun peeked through the mist in St. Mary Mead, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets. Miss Jane Marple stood at her garden gate, her coat buttoned against the chilly air, her eyes scanning. The village? Yesterday's stranger, Mr. Victor Lang, as he called himself at the fete, had stirred her curiosity like a pebble dropped in a still pond. His polished manners and quick glances didn't belong here, and that letter to the maestro at Willow Cottage weighed on her mind. She tightened her scarf, picked up her cane, and set off for a walk. She had a plan. Her path took her past the bakery, where the smell of fresh bread wafted out, and the butcher's, where Tommy was sweeping the doorstep. "Morning, Miss Marple," he called, waving. She smiled back, her face soft, but her thoughts sharp. She wasn't just strolling. She was hunting for clues, and Willow Cottage was her target. The crates she'd seen there, marked with foreign stamps, hinted at something bigger than village gossip. Smugglers, Raymond had said in his letter. Miss Marple didn't doubt it, but she needed to see more. The village was waking up. Shopkeepers opened shutters, and children ran to school, their laughter echoing. Miss Marple moved slowly, her cane tapping, her grey hat bobbing. To anyone watching, she was just an old lady enjoying the day. But her eyes missed nothing. A delivery van rumbled by, a dog barked, and there, near the post office, was Lang. He leaned against a lamp-post, reading a newspaper, but his head tilted slightly, tracking the van. Miss Marple's lips twitched. "You're not reading, Mr. Lang." She thought. "You're waiting." She kept her distance, pausing to admire Mrs. Baker's roses. Lang didn't notice her, or so she hoped. He folded his paper, checked his watch, and walked toward the edge of the village. Miss Marple followed, her steps careful. The road to Willow Cottage was quiet, lined with hedges and old oaks. She stayed far back, using the trees for cover. Lang reached the cottage gate, glanced around, and slipped inside. A moment later, the shed door creaked open, and he disappeared into it. Miss Marple stopped, her heart beating a little faster. The shed was where she'd seen the crates, wooden, weathered, with strange stamps. She wanted a closer look, but not now. Lang was too alert, and she wasn't foolish enough to barge in. Instead, she noted the cottage's details: the sagging roof, the overgrown garden, the faint tire tracks in the mud. "Someone's been here," she murmured. "And not just you." She turned back, her mind buzzing. At home, she made tea and sat at her kitchen table, her little black book open. She wrote down what she'd seen: Lang's path, the shed, the tire tracks. Then she added a question. What's in the crates? Raymond's letter had mentioned Smuggled goods, art, jewels, books. But why St. Mary Mead? It was a sleepy place, far from London's bustle or Dover's ports. "You picked this village for a reason," she said softly, as if speaking to Lang. "And I'll find out why." The telephone rang, startling her. It was Raymond, his voice crackling through the line. "Aunt Jane, I've got news," he said. "Those crate markings. They're tied to a smuggling ring. Rare stuff. Paintings, statues, even ancient coins. Scotland Yard's been chasing them for months. The ring's leader calls himself the Maestro. Sound familiar?" Miss Marple's grip tightened on the phone. "Very familiar, dear," she said. "Anything else?" Raymond hesitated. "Just be careful. These aren't small-time crooks. They're clever, and they don't like being crossed." She thanked him and hung up, her mind racing. The Maestro wasn't just a name on a letter. He was real, and Lang was likely his man in St. Mary Mead. But was Lang the Maestro himself, or just a pawn? Miss Marple sipped her tea, thinking. People's habits gave them away, she knew. Lang's careful moves, his fake smiles at the fete, his trips to the shed, they were threads in a web. She'd pull them until the pattern showed. That afternoon, she visited the vicarage where Mrs. Clement was hosting a knitting circle. The parlour was warm, filled with the clink of teacups and the chatter of women. Miss Marple joined them, her needles clicking, her ears open. She steered the talk to newcomers, mentioning Lang's appearance at the fete. "Such a charming man," she said lightly. "Does anyone know him?" Mrs. Price, who joined the circle, perked up. "He was at the post office yesterday, asking about parcel rates. Said he's expecting deliveries. Big ones." Miss Marple's needles paused. "Deliveries?" she asked, her voice curious but calm. Mrs. Price nodded. "He didn't say what, but he paid for express service. Odd for someone just visiting." The other women chimed in, speculating about Lang's travels or his fancy coat. But Miss Marple stayed quiet, her mind filing the detail away. Deliveries meant more crates, maybe more clues. She smiled and changed the subject, asking about the vicar's sermon. No need to stir suspicion yet. Back home, she wrote to Inspector Craddock, a young Scotland Yard man who'd worked with her before. She kept her letter short, mentioning the crates, Lang, and the Maestro's name, asking if he knew of smuggling in the area. Craddock respected her, though he sometimes teased her about her village detective work. She didn't mind. He'd listen, and if the Maestro was as dangerous as Raymond said, she'd need his help. The next day, she took another walk, this time at dusk. The village was settling, lights glowing in windows, smoke curling from chimneys. Willow Cottage loomed ahead, its windows dark except for a faint flicker in the shed. Miss Marple crept closer, her cane silent on the grass. The gate was ajar, and she slipped through, her heart pounding. She wasn't young, but she was stubborn, and curiosity drove her like wind in a sail. The shed was old, its wood splintered, but the lock was new, shiny and strong. Through a crack in the door, she saw Lang inside, lit by a lantern. He was prying open a crate, his movements quick. Inside, something glinted, metal, maybe gold. Miss Marple squinted, trying to see more, but a twig snapped under her foot. Lang froze, his head whipping toward the door. She ducked behind a bush, her breath shallow. Seconds passed, then the shed door slammed shut, and footsteps crunched away. She waited, counting to 100 before moving. Her knees ached, but her mind was clear. She'd seen enough. The crates held treasures, smuggled and hidden, and Lang was no ordinary visitor. Back home, she locked her door and sat by the fire, her knitting untouched. The maestro's shadow was growing, stretching over St. Mary Mead like a storm cloud. She wasn't afraid, but she was careful. Men like Lang didn't play fair. The next morning, a letter from Craddock arrived. "Miss Marple," he wrote, "your tip about the maestro is gold. We've linked him to thefts in London and Bristol. Rare artefacts, sold to private collectors. No proof yet, but Willow Cottage is on our radar. Stay clear, please. This is bigger than you think." Miss Marple smiled. Bigger, maybe, but not too big for her. She'd solved puzzles before, untangling lies with patience and a sharp eye. Lang and his maestro would be no different. She spent the day in the village, chatting with neighbours, listening for whispers. At the bakery, Mrs. Baker mentioned a strange car near Willow Cottage at night, its engine loud enough to wake her. At the grocer's, Mr. Hobbs said Lang had bought canned food and candles, like he's camping out. Each detail was a piece, fitting into Miss Marple's puzzle. She pictured Lang in the shed, surrounded by stolen goods, answering to someone, or being someone, called the maestro. That evening, she attended a village meeting at the hall, where talk of the fate's success filled the air. Lang was there, charming as ever, shaking hands with the vicar and complimenting Mrs. Price's scones. Miss Marple watched from a corner, her tea cooling. Lang's laugh was loud, but his eyes were cold, scanning the room. When they met hers, he paused, then tipped his hat, a small smile on his lips. She nodded back, her face blank. "You know I'm watching," she thought, "and I know you're hiding." The meeting ended, and Lang left quickly, his coat flapping, as he headed toward Willow Cottage. Miss Marple didn't follow. She'd seen enough for now. At home she sat with her black book writing, "Lang in shed, gold in crates, maestro leads, who is he?" She closed the book and stared at the fire. The village slept, but she didn't. Her mind spun, weaving threads of truth. Lang was the key, but the maestro was the lock. She'd find a way to turn it. The next day she walked to the post office, her letter to Raymond ready. She asked him to dig deeper into the maestro's past, any old cases, any names. As she handed the letter to Mrs. Price, the door jingled and Lang walked in. He nodded at her, his smile tight. "Miss Marple," he said, his voice smooth. "Always busy, aren't you?" She smiled back, her eyes steady. "Oh, just keeping up with friends, Mr. Lang. And you, settling in?" He shrugged, buying stamps, but his fingers tapped the counter, a nervous tick. Miss Marple filed it away. Nervous men made mistakes. She left, her cane tapping, her heart light. The game was on, and she was ready. The maestro's shadow might be long, but Miss Marple's reach was longer. She'd pull the truth into the light, one quiet step at a time. Chapter 3. A Game of Observation. The sun shone bright over St. Mary Mead, painting the village in golden light. The annual fete was in full swing on the green, with stalls selling jam, knitted hats and homemade pies. Children darted through the crowd, clutching sticky toffee apples, while fiddlers played a lively tune. Miss Jane Marple stood near a table piled with scones, her grey coat neat, her hat tilted just so. To the villagers she was just another face in the cheerful chaos. But her sharp eyes were working, watching for one man, Victor Lang, the stranger tied to the maestro and the mysterious crates at Willow Cottage. She'd spent the morning planning. Lang was slippery, always watching, but the fate was perfect for spying. People let their guard down amid laughter and chatter, and Miss Marple knew how to blend in. Her cane rested lightly in her hand, her knitting bag slung over her arm. She smiled at Mrs. Baker, who was selling bread, and bought a loaf, all while scanning the crowd. There he was, near the vicar's stall, shaking hands and grinning. His dark overcoat was gone, replaced by a tweed jacket, but his careful movements gave him away. "You can't hide from me, Mr. Lang," Miss Marple thought, her lips curving. Shah moved closer, pausing at a stall selling lavender soap. Lang was talking to the vicar's wife, Mrs. Clement, who was showing off a shiny brooch pinned to her shawl. It was sapphire, an old family piece, sparkling in the sun. Lang leaned in, his eyes fixed on it, his smile too bright. Miss Marple's fingers tightened on her cane. "You're not admiring, are you?" she thought. "You're planning." She knew men like Lang, charmers with sticky fingers. The brooch was just the kind of thing a smuggler might want, small but valuable, easy to slip into a pocket. Miss Marple drifted to the next stall, pretending to eye a jar of honey. She listened as Lang's voice carried over the crowd, smooth as butter. "What a lovely piece, Mrs. Clement," he said. "Must be worth a fortune." Mrs. Clement laughed, touching the brooch. "Oh, it's just a family trinket. I only wear it for special days." Lang nodded, his eyes glinting, then moved on, blending into the crowd. Miss Marple's heart quickened. She'd seen that look before, on men who thought they'd found an easy mark. She followed at a distance, her steps slow but deliberate. The fate was a maze of colour and noise, children shouting, dogs barking, the fiddlers striking up a new tune. Lang weaved through it all, stopping to chat here and there, but always moving, always watching. He avoided the postmistress, Mrs. Price, who'd been asking questions about his parcels. He dodged Mr. Hobbs, the grocer, who'd sold him candles and canned food. You don't want folks who know too much, Miss Marple thought, her eyes narrowing. She sat on a bench, pulling out her knitting to look busy. Her needles clicked, but her gaze stayed on Lang. He lingered near a stall selling old books, flipping through pages without reading. His real focus was on the crowd, his head turning slightly to track Mrs. Clement as she moved to another stall. Miss Marple's mind raced. The brooch was a prize, but was it his only one? The crates at Willow Cottage held bigger treasures. Gold, maybe, or rare heart. Was the brooch a side job, or part of a larger plan? A shadow fell over her. Miss Marple, enjoying the fete? It was Dolly Bantry, her friend, holding a basket of apples. Miss Marple smiled, tucking her knitting away. "Oh, very much, Dolly. Such a lively day." Dolly plopped down beside her, fanning herself. "Lively's right. Did you see that new fellow, Mr. Lang? Quite the charmer. He was telling the vicar about his travels, Paris, Rome, all over." Miss Marple nodded, her face calm. "He does have stories, doesn't he? Did he say why he's here?" Dolly shrugged. "Something about needing a quiet place to write. Sounds romantic, if you ask me." She laughed, but Miss Marple didn't. Writing was a fine cover for a man who didn't want questions. She filed it away, along with Lang's interest in the brooch. "We should invite him to tea," Dolly went on. "Get to know him." Miss Marple's lips twitched. "Perhaps," she said, but she was already planning something else. The fete wound down as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows. Lang stayed until the end, helping the vicar stack chairs, his smile never fading. Miss Marple watched from afar, her knitting bag heavy on her arm. When he finally left, heading toward Willow Cottage, she didn't follow. She'd seen enough. He was circling Mrs. Clement's brooch like a fox around a henhouse. But there was more to his game. The maestro's name hung over it all. A puzzle she hadn't cracked yet. That night, the village buzzed with bad news. Mrs. Clement's brooch was gone, vanished from her shawl sometime during the fete. The vicarage was in an uproar, with the vicar calling the constable and Mrs. Clement wringing her hands. Miss Marple heard about it over tea with Dolly, who was full of theories. "Probably a pickpocket," Dolly said, her eyes wide. "These feats attract all sorts. Or maybe it fell off in the grass." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her face thoughtful. "Maybe," she said, but she didn't believe it. She walked to the vicarage, her cane tapping the quiet streets. The constable was there, a young man named Barnes, taking notes. "No sign of it, Miss Marple," he said, scratching his head. "Mrs. Clement swears she felt it on her shawl at the fete, but by evening it was gone." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes scanning the parlour. Nothing was out of place. No broken locks, no muddy footprints. "A clean job," she murmured. Barnes blinked. "What's that?" She smiled. "Just thinking aloud, dear." Back home, she sat by the fire, her little black book open. She wrote, "Brooch stolen. Lang at fete, watching Mrs. C. No proof, but too neat." She tapped her pen, thinking. The theft was bold, done in broad daylight with hundreds of people around. Lang was clever, but was he that clever? Or was someone else pulling the strings? The maestro's name loomed in her mind, tied to the crates, the smuggling, and now this. "It's not about the brooch," she said softly. "It's a test." She thought back to the fete, replaying Lang's movements. He'd been everywhere, talking to everyone, but always near Mrs. Clement. Had he slipped the brooch off her shawl in the crowd, or had he signalled someone else? Miss Marple knew thieves worked in teams sometimes, one to distract, one to steal. Lang's charm made him a perfect front man. But why risk it for a brooch when the crates held bigger prizes? "You're probing," she thought. "Seeing who notices, who cares?" The next morning she visited the post office, where Mrs. Price was sorting letters, her face grim. "Terrible about the brooch," she said. "Mrs. Clement's heartbroken." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes on a new letter in the pile, addressed to the Maestro, Willow Cottage. It was the second one she'd seen, and it made her skin prickle. "Any more parcels for Mr. Lang?" she asked, keeping her voice light. Mrs. Price shook her head. "Not today, but he's been in twice, asking about delivery times. Always in a hurry." Miss Marple left, her mind spinning. Lang was moving fast, too fast for a man just writing in a quiet village. She wrote to Raymond again, asking for more on the maestro's smuggling ring. "Look for small thefts," she added, "like jewellery. tied to bigger crimes. Then she called Inspector Craddock, using the vicarage phone to avoid eavesdroppers. "Jane," he said, his voice warm but wary, "you're stirring up trouble, aren't you?" She chuckled. "Just a little, Inspector. Have you heard of a thief called the Maestro?" Craddock's tone sharpened. "Where did you get that name?" She told him about the letters, the crates, and Lang, keeping her voice steady. "The brooch theft might be connected," she said. "It's too clean for a common pickpocket." Craddock sighed. "You're on to something, but it's dangerous. The Maestro's name has come up in London. Big heists, no arrests. I'll send a man to check Willow Cottage, but stay out of it, please." Miss Marple smiled. "Of course, Inspector," she said, but her fingers were crossed. She spent the day in the village, listening to gossip. The brooch was all anyone talked about. Some blamed gypsies, others a clumsy pin. Miss Marple let them talk, picking up scraps. Tommy, the butcher's boy, said he'd seen Lang near Mrs. Clement at the fete, acting all friendly. Mrs. Baker mentioned a stranger in a cap near the vicar's stall, gone before she could see his face. A partner? Miss Marple wondered, her mind filing it away. That evening she sat with Dolly over tea, the fire crackling. Dolly was still buzzing about the theft. "It's like a story, Jane. A jewel thief in St. Mary Mead." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her eyes distant. "It's not about the jewel, Dolly," she said. "It's about power. Someone's testing the village, seeing how we react." Dolly stared. "You mean it's planned? By who?" Miss Marple shrugged, her face calm. "Just a guess," she said, but her mind was certain. The Maestro was playing a game, and Lang was his knight on the board. She went home, locking her door tight. The village was quiet, but she felt eyes watching. She checked her curtains, then opened her black book. Brooch gone. Lang's the thief, or his man is. Maestro's testing. Why? She closed the book, her heart steady. The fate had been her chance to watch Lang, and she'd seen enough. He was clever, but not clever enough. The Maestro's shadow was spreading, but Miss Marple was ready. She'd keep watching, keep listening, until the truth came clear. Her needles clicked, the fire glowed, and outside the night hid secrets she'd soon uncover. Chapter 4. The trap is set. The morning mist hung low over St. Mary Mead, wrapping the village in a soft grey blanket. Miss Jane Marple sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea steaming beside her little black book. The theft of Mrs. Clement's sapphire brooch at the fete had set the village buzzing, but Miss Marple saw beyond the gossip. The brooch was no random prize. It was a move in a bigger game, played by the mysterious Maestro and his man, Victor Lang. The crates at Willow Cottage, the smuggler's stamps, the letters addressed to the Maestro. They all pointed to a plan, and Miss Marple was determined to unravel it. She sipped her tea, her sharp eyes on her notes. Lang had been at the fete, circling Mrs. Clement, his charm masking a thief's intent. The brooch was gone, taken cleanly in the crowd, and Miss Marple was sure Lang was behind it. But why? A sapphire was valuable, but the crates held richer treasures. Gold, art, maybe ancient coins, according to Raymond's letter. "You're testing us," she murmured, tapping her pen, "seeing who notices, who fights back." The Maestro wasn't just stealing. He was probing the village, and Miss Marple was his biggest threat. She closed her book and stood, her grey coat all ready, buttoned. Today she'd push back. She'd set a trap, something to draw Lang out and show his hand. But first she needed help. Inspector Craddock, her contact at Scotland Yard, was the man for the job. He'd listened when she called about the maestro, his voice tight with worry. "This is bigger than St. Mary Mead," he'd said. "Stay clear." Miss Marple had smiled, promising nothing. She didn't stay clear of puzzles. She solved them. Her cane tapped the cobblestones as she walked to the vicarage, where the telephone was quieter than her own. The village was stirring. Shopkeepers, sweeping steps, children skipping to school. She nodded at Tommy, the butcher's boy, who waved from his bicycle. "Morning, Miss Marple," he called. She smiled, but her eyes scanned for Lang. He wasn't at the post office or the green. Good. She didn't want him watching. At the vicarage, Mrs. Clement was still shaken, her eyes red from fretting over the brooch. "It's not just the value," she told Miss Marple, pouring tea. "It's family. My grandmother's." Miss Marple patted her hand, her voice gentle. "We'll find it, dear. Thieves slip up." But her mind was on the call she needed to make. When Mrs. Clement left to fetch scones, Miss Marple dialed Craddock's number, her fingers steady. "Jane," Craddock answered, his voice half teasing, half worried. "What now?" She kept it short, describing the brooch theft, Lang's behaviour, and the maestro's name on the letters. "It's no coincidence," she said. "The theft's a distraction. But from what? Those crates at Willow Cottage are the key." Craddock sighed. "You're right. We've tied the maestro to a string of heists. Museums, private homes. He's clever, Jane. No fingerprints, no witnesses. I'll send a man to check the cottage, but you must stay out of it." Miss Marple's lips twitched. "Of course, Inspector," she said, her tone sweet. She hung up, her mind already spinning. Craddock's men would help, but they were too loud, too official. She needed something subtler, something Lang wouldn't see coming. Back home, she sat by the fire, her knitting untouched, and hatched a plan. The maestro liked games. She'd give him one. Her idea was simple but bold. She'd plant a rumour, something tempting enough to lure Lang, or the maestro himself, into the open. A rare treasure, stored carelessly, would be too good to resist. The vicarage was the perfect spot. Already hit once, its lock's weak. She'd make it seem like a priceless manuscript. Maybe a lost Shakespeare folio was hidden there, waiting for a thief. If Lang took the bait, she'd catch him. If he didn't, she'd learn something else. Either way, she'd win. She started at the post office, where Mrs. Price was sorting letters, her tongue as loose as ever. "Good morning, dear," Miss Marple said, buying stamps. "I heard the strangest thing. The vicar's got a rare book at the vicarage, some old play, worth a fortune. He's keeping it quiet, but you know how news travels." Mrs. Price's eyes widened. "A book? At the vicarage? Well, I never." Miss Marple smiled, her face innocent. "Oh, it's probably nothing. Don't spread it, dear." She knew Mrs. Price would. By noon, half the village would be whispering. Next, she visited Dolly Bantry, who loved a good story. Over tea, Miss Marple dropped the same hint, her voice casual. "The vicar's got something special, Dolly. An old manuscript, very valuable. I hope he's careful after that brooch business." Dolly gasped, her cup clinking. "Jane, you don't say. A treasure in St. Mary Mead? I'll tell Arthur. He'll want to see it. Miss Marple nodded, hiding her smile. The rumour was spreading. A pebble in the pond, rippling toward Lang. She spent the day planting seeds, mentioning the manuscript to the grocer, the baker, even Tommy, who'd carry it to every doorstep. By evening, the village was humming. Miss Marple sat at home, her black book open, writing, "Rumour set. Manuscript at vicarage. Lang will hear. Waiting." She closed the book, her heart steady. The trap was laid, but she needed to be ready. Lang was no fool, and the maestro was worse. She called Craddock again, this time from her own phone. The line crackled, but his voice was clear. "Jane, what's this about a manuscript?" he asked, sounding tired. She chuckled. "Just a little bait, Inspector. I've spread word of a rare book at the vicarage. If Lang moves, we'll have him." Craddock groaned. "You're playing with fire. If the maestro's involved, he'll smell a trap." Miss Marple's voice was firm. "Then we'll learn how clever he is. Can you have men ready?" Craddock agreed, promising a plainclothes team to watch the vicarage that night. "But you stay home," he said. "No heroics." She promised, her fingers crossed. She had no plans to rush in, but she wasn't staying home. She'd be at the vicarage, hidden, watching. Her trap needed her eyes, her mind. Lang might slip, past the police, but not her. That evening, she walked to the vicarage, her cane silent on the grass. The village was quiet, its lights dim, the air cold. Mrs. Clement welcomed her, puzzled but glad. "Jane, so late?" she asked. Miss Marple smiled. "Just a visit, dear. Mind if I sit by your fire?" She settled in the parlour, her knitting in hand, her eyes on the windows. The vicar was out, the house still. Craddock's men were outside, hidden in the shadows, their radios off to avoid noise. She'd worked with the vicar earlier, placing a fake manuscript, a bundle of old papers wrapped in leather, in the study desk. It looked real enough to fool a thief, but not so real it'd raise doubts. If Lang came, he'd find it, and Craddock's men would pounce. Miss Marple's needles clicked, the only sound in the room. Mrs. Clement brought tea, then went to bed, leaving her alone. The clock ticked toward midnight, each second heavy. Outside, the wind rustled the hedges. Miss Marple's eyes flicked to the window, catching a shadow. It was quick, barely there, but she knew someone was moving. She set her knitting down, her hands steady, and slid into the dark corner of the parlour, where the lamp's light didn't reach. Her heart thumped, but her mind was clear. "Come on, Mr. Lang," she thought. "Show yourself." The back door creaked, so soft she almost missed it. Footsteps followed, light and careful, crossing the kitchen. Miss Marple held her breath, her eyes fixed on the parlour doorway. A figure appeared, tall, in a dark coat. It was Lang, his face pale in the moonlight, his hands gloved. He didn't see her. He moved to the study, silent as a cat, and she heard the desk drawer open, papers rustling. "He got you," she thought, but she stayed still. Craddock's men needed time. Lang found the manuscript, his breath hissing out. He tucked it under his coat, then froze, his head turning. Had he heard something? Miss Marple's heart skipped, but she didn't move. Lang stepped back, his eyes scanning the dark, then slipped toward the kitchen. Outside, a twig snapped, Craddock's men too eager. Lang bolted, the back door slamming. Miss Marple stood, her cane in hand, and moved to the window. She saw him sprint across the garden, a shadow melting into the night. Craddock's men gave chase, their boots loud on the grass. Miss Marple stayed put, her mind racing. Lang had taken the bait, but he'd escaped. Or had he? The manuscript was fake, useless to him, but he didn't know that. He'd think he'd won, and that would make him bold. "You're not as clever as you think," she murmured, her lips curving. The trap hadn't caught him, but it had shown her something. Lang was fast, but he was scared, and scared men made mistakes. She met Craddock at the vicarage an hour later, his face grim. "Got away," he said, rubbing his neck. "Slipped through a hedge and vanished. But we've got the manuscript back. He dropped it in the run." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "He wasn't after the book, Inspector," she said. "He was testing us. He wanted to know who's watching." Craddock stared. "You think he knew it was a trap?" She shrugged. "Maybe, but he's worried now. That's good." Back home she locked her door and sat by the fire, her black book open. She wrote, "Trap set. Lang took manuscript, escaped, knows he's watched. Maestro's next move." She closed the book, her heart steady. The village slept, but she didn't. Lang was the maestro's shadow, moving to his tune. She'd rattled him, and that was enough for now. The game was on, and Miss Marple was ready for the next round. Her needles clicked, the fire glowed, and outside the night hid secrets she'd soon uncover. Chapter 5. The Nighttime Encounter. The moon hung low over St. Mary Mead, its pale light slipping through the curtains of Miss Jane Marple's cottage. She sat by the fire, her knitting untouched, her little black book open on her lap. The trap she'd set at the vicarage had worked. Victor Lang had come for the fake manuscript, proving he was no ordinary visitor. But he'd slipped away, vanishing into the night before Inspector Craddock's men could grab him. Miss Marple's lips pressed tight. "You're quick, Mr. Lang," she thought, "but you're not invisible." The maestro's shadow was growing, and she was closer to catching it. Her trap had shown her something else. Lang wasn't just a thief. He was careful, almost too careful, like a man who knew he was being watched. The brooch theft, the crates at Willow Cottage, the letters to the maestro. They were pieces of a puzzle, and Lang was the key. But was he the maestro himself, or just a pawn? Miss Marple tapped her pen, her sharp eyes on her notes. "You took the bait," she murmured, "but you didn't trust it. Why? The answer was out there, and she'd find it." The village was quiet, its streets empty under the starry sky. Miss Marple stood, her grey coat already on, her cane in hand. She'd promised Craddock to stay out of trouble, but promises didn't solve puzzles. Lang was rattled, and rattled men made mistakes. If she could catch him off guard, she might see the maestro's next move. She locked her door and slipped out, her steps soft on the cobblestones. The air was cold, smelling of damp leaves and wood smoke. She headed for the vicarage, where the trap had played out, hoping for clues Lang might have left. The vicarage loomed ahead, its windows dark. Craddock's men were gone, their chase over, but Miss Marple's work wasn't. She moved to the garden, her cane silent on the grass, and checked the back door. It was locked now, but she saw scratches on the frame, fresh and sharp. "Your tools, Mr. Lang," she thought, her heart quickening. He'd picked the lock with ease, a skill that fit a smuggler's man. She scanned the ground, her eyes catching a glint in the moonlight. A small metal pin dropped in his rush. She tucked it into her pocket, a tiny piece of the puzzle. She didn't stay long. Lang might return, and she wasn't foolish enough to face him alone. Back home, she sat by the fire, the pin on her table. It was a lockpick's tool, thin and clever, not something a writer like Lang would carry. She wrote in her book, "Lockpick at Vicarage, Lang's work. He's trained, not just lucky." Then she leaned back, her mind spinning. The maestro's plan was bigger than a brooch or a fake manuscript. The crates at Willow Cottage held the real prize, and Lang was guarding them. She needed to push harder, force his hand. The next morning, she called Craddock from the vicarage, keeping her voice low. "He left a lockpick," she said, describing the pin. "He's no amateur, Inspector." Craddock groaned. "Jane, you went back. I told you to stay home." She chuckled, her tone light. "Just a walk, dear. What about the manuscript? Any sign of Lang?" Craddock sighed. "He dropped it in the hedge, like I said. We're dusting it for prints, but he's careful. No trace at Willow Cottage either. My men checked at dawn. It's empty." Miss Marple frowned. Empty? She'd seen Lang in the shed, prying open crates. He'd moved them, or hidden them better. "Keep watching the cottage," she said. "He'll be back." Craddock promised to, but his voice was tired. "This maestro's a ghost, Jane. We need more than rumours and lockpicks." She hung up, her mind racing. Craddock was right. They needed proof, and she'd get it, one quiet step at a time. She spent the day in the village, her ears open. The brooch theft was still the talk of St. Mary Mead, with Mrs. Price blaming city folk, and Mr. Hobbs swearing he'd seen a stranger in a cap near the fete. Miss Marple listened, her smile polite, but her thoughts were on Lang. And the shoe, post office. She checked for more letters to the maestro. None today, but Mrs. Price mentioned Lang's latest visit. "He was in a hurry," she said, sorting parcels. "Asked about a package, then left when I said it hadn't come." Miss Marple nodded, her heart ticking faster. Lang was waiting for something, more crates maybe, or orders from the maestro. She bought stamps, her face calm, and walked home, her cane tapping. The village was bright, children playing, dogs barking, but she felt a shadow over it. Lang was close, and the maestro closer. She needed to act before they struck again. That afternoon, a letter arrived from Raymond, her nephew. "Aunt Jane," he wrote, "the maestro's name is old news in London. A thief, maybe a mastermind, linked to heists 10 years ago. He vanished after a botched job, art stolen from a duke. No one knows his face, but he loves taunting police. Your Lang fits the type, smooth, slippery. Be careful." Miss Marple read it twice, her lips tight. Taunting police. That explained the lockpick, the bold theft, the escape. Lang wasn't just stealing, he was playing. She sat by her window, her knitting in her lap, watching the street. The village was settling, its lights winking on. Then she saw it. A figure in a dark coat, moving fast past the post office. Lang. Her heart jumped, but she stayed still. He was heading for Willow Cottage, his steps quick. She couldn't follow, not now, but she could prepare. If he was checking the crates, he'd be back at the vicarage or somewhere else, looking for the next prize. She needed to be ready. That evening she visited Dolly Bantry, her friend, for tea. Dolly was full of gossip, her eyes wide. "Jane, they say the brooch thief's still here. Mrs. Clement's locking her doors tight." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her voice soft. "Thieves don't stay long, Dolly. They move when they're scared." Dolly laughed. "Scared? In St. Mary Mead? You're teasing." But Miss Marple wasn't. Lang was scared, or he wouldn't be so quick, so careful. She'd use that. Back home, she found a note slipped under her door. Her breath caught as she picked it up. The writing was neat, almost mocking. "Clever Miss Marple, but the game has just begun." No signature, but she knew. Lang or the maestro himself. Her heart thumped, but her hands were steady. She locked the door, checked the windows, and sat by the fire, the note in her lap. "You know I'm watching," she thought, "and you're worried." The note was a taunt, like Raymond said. The maestro loved games, and this was his move. But it was also a mistake. Lang, or whoever wrote it, had shown his hand. He was close, watching her, and that meant he was in St. Mary Mead. Miss Marple wrote in her book, "Note at door, Lang or maestro. They're here, nervous, next move mine." She closed it, her mind clear. The trap hadn't caught him, but it had shaken him. Now she'd set another. She called Craddock the next morning, her voice firm. "I got a note," she said, reading it aloud. Craddock swore softly. "Jane, that's a threat. I'm sending men to your cottage." She shook her head, though he couldn't see. "No need, Inspector. It's a game, and I'm playing. Watch Willow Cottage tonight. Lang's moving." Craddock argued, but she was firm. "Trust me," she said. He sighed. "I do, but you're stubborn. Men at the cottage. Dusk. You stay home." She promised, her fingers crossed. She wouldn't stay home. The vicarage was still the best spot. Lang knew its weaknesses, and he'd struck there before. She'd be there, hidden, watching. She spent the day quietly, knitting at the Fates' leftover stall, chatting with Mrs. Price, listening for Lang's name. He'd been seen near the green, buying apples, his smile tight. "He's staying close," she thought, her needles clicking. Good. That night she slipped to the vicarage, her coat blending with the shadows. Mrs. Clement was asleep, the vicar out. Miss Marple settled in the parlour, her knitting in hand, her eyes on the back door. Craddock's men were at Willow Cottage, but she knew Lang. He'd come here, chasing the thrill. The clock ticked past midnight. The house silent. Then a soft scrape at the door. Her heart leaped, but she stayed still, tucked in the dark. The door opened, and Lang stepped in, his gloves on, his face pale. He moved to the study, quick and sure, searching the desk again. Miss Marple watched, her breath shallow. He found nothing. The manuscript was gone, safe with Craddock. His hands shook, a flash of anger crossing his face. Then he heard it, a rustle outside. Craddock's men too close. Lang spun, bolting for the window, climbing out like a cat. Miss Marple stood, her cane ready, but didn't follow. She'd seen enough. The garden erupted in shouts, boots pounding. Lang was gone, slipping through the hedges. Miss Marple locked the window, her heart steady. He'd come back, empty-handed, and he'd left another clue, his fear. She met Craddock at dawn, his face red. "He's a ghost," he said. "In and out, no trace." Miss Marple smiled. "Not a ghost, Inspector. A man, and he's scared. Keep watching." Craddock nodded, his eyes sharp. "You're something else, Jane." Back home she sat by the fire, her book open. Lang at vicarage, no take. Angry, scared. Maestro's close. She closed it, her mind racing. The note, the lockpick, the crates, they were threads, weaving tight. Lang was the Maestro's man, maybe the Maestro himself, and he was cracking. Miss Marple's trap had failed again, but each failure showed her more. The game was heating up, and she was ready. Her needles clicked, the fire glowed, and outside the night hid a thief she'd soon catch. Chapter 6. Unravelling the Web. The dawn light crept over St. Mary Mead, painting the village in soft pinks and golds. Miss Jane Marple sat at her kitchen table, a pot of tea steaming, her little black book open. The night's chase at the vicarage had left her restless. Victor Lang had slipped through Inspector Craddock's net again, a shadow vanishing into the dark. But he'd left clues, his lockpick, his fear, and that taunting note under her door. Clever Miss Marple, but the game has just begun. She sipped her tea, her sharp eyes on her notes. "You're bold, Mr. Lang," she murmured, "but bold men trip." Lang was the Maestro's man, maybe the Maestro himself, tied to the stolen brooch, the crates at Willow Cottage, and a smuggling ring that stretched beyond the village. Her traps had rattled him, but not enough. The note proved he was watching her, and that meant he was close. Miss Marple's heart ticked steady. She'd set traps before, but now she needed answers. Who was the Maestro? What was his plan? The crates held gold, art, maybe more, but why hide them in St. Mary Mead? She tapped her pen, thinking. "You're building something," she said softly. "I'll find out what." She stood, her grey coat buttoned, her cane in hand. The village was waking, its streets quiet but alive with early risers. She needed help, someone with deeper knowledge of old crimes. Sir Henry Clithering, a retired Scotland Yard man and old friend, was the one. He'd chased thieves like the Maestro before, and his memory was sharp. She wrote him a letter, her words careful. "Dear Sir Henry, a name from the past. The Maestro has surfaced here. Smuggling, theft, a man named Lang. Anything familiar?" She sealed it and walked to the post office, her cane tapping. Mrs. Price was sorting letters, her face bright. "Morning, Miss Marple. Another letter." Miss Marple smiled, handing it over. "Just catching up, dear. Any news?" Mrs. Price leaned in, her voice low. "That Mr. Lang was here yesterday, asking about parcels again. Looked jumpy, like he hadn't slept." Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her face stayed calm. "Jumpy? Well, moving's stressful." She left, her mind filing the detail. Lang was nervous, and nervous men made mistakes. Back home, she called Craddock, using her own phone now. Lang knew she was involved, so hiding was pointless. "Jane," Craddock answered, his voice rough, we're chasing shadows. No sign of Lang, no crates at the cottage." Miss Marple nodded, though he couldn't see. "He's moved them, Inspector. Check the shed again, and watch for deliveries. He's waiting for something." Craddock sighed. "You're sure he's our man?" Her voice was firm. "Sure as I am of tea in the morning. He's scared, and that's our edge." She spent the morning in the village, her ears open. The brooch theft was fading from gossip, replaced by talk of the Fates' success and the vicar's new sermon. But Miss Marple heard whispers. Tommy, the butcher's boy, said he'd seen Lang near the cottage at dusk, carrying a bag. Mrs. Baker mentioned a strange car, black and sleek, parked on the village edge. "And same one as before," she said, kneading dough. Miss Marple smiled, buying bread. "Curious," she said, but her mind was racing. Lang was moving, planning, and the maestro was behind it. That afternoon Sir Henry's reply arrived, faster than she'd hoped. His letter was long, his handwriting neat. "Jane," he wrote, "the maestro's an old ghost. I chased him years ago, a master thief, real name Edward Vane, an aristocrat turned crook. He stole art, jewels, anything rare, and loved taunting us. His last job, a duke's painting, went wrong. He vanished, swearing revenge. If he's back, your Lang might be him, or his man. Vane was sly, loved games, never worked alone. Watch your step." Miss Marple read it twice, her lips tight. Edward Vane, a name at last. She sat by the fire, her knitting untouched, piecing it together. Vane, the maestro, matched Lang's tricks, the charm, the bold moves, the taunts. But was Lang Vane? His face was young, too young for a man from Sir Henry's time. A partner, then, or a follower? The crates, the brooch, the note, they were Vane's style, a web of crime spun from Willow Cottage. "You're here," she thought, "and I'm close." She wrote in her book, "Maestro showed Edward Vane. Lang his man, or Vane himself. Crates, key." She called Raymond, her nephew, next. His voice was tense. "Aunt Jane, I dug deeper. The maestro's tied to a network. Dealers in London, Paris, even New York. They move stolen art through small towns, hiding it till it's safe. Merrymead fits. Those crates, probably paintings or statues, headed for a buyer." Miss Marple's heart ticked faster. "Thank you, dear," she said. "Anything on a man named Vane?" Raymond paused. "Not yet, but I'll check. Be careful." She smiled. "Always am." The village was quiet that evening, its lights dim under a cloudy sky. Miss Marple walked to Dolly Bantry's, her cane tapping, her mind spinning. Over tea she shared just enough to keep Dolly curious. "Dolly," she said, "that Lang fellow's odd, don't you think? Always rushing about." Dolly's eyes widened. "Odd? He's charming. But now you mention it, he never says much about himself." Miss Marple nodded, sipping her tea. "Some men hide more than they show." Dolly laughed, but Miss Marple's words were a hook, pulling Dolly into her web. Back home, she found another note under her door. Same neat writing. "You're digging, old lady. Dig too deep, you'll fall." Her breath caught, but her hands were steady. She locked the door, checked the windows, and sat by the fire, the note in her lap. Lang, or Vane, was scared, lashing out. "You're close," she thought, and "you know I'm closer." She wrote in her book, "Second note, Threat. They're here, watching. Crates moved? She closed it, her heart steady. The maestro's web was tight, but she'd cut through. The next morning she visited the post office, her eyes on the letter pile. No maestro today, but Mrs. Price was chatty. Lang's parcel came, she said, stacking envelopes. Big one, heavy. He took it quick, didn't talk. Miss Marple's heart jumped. Another crate, or something else? Interesting, she said, buying stamps. She left, her mind racing. Lang was moving fast, too fast. The maestro's plan was rolling, and she needed to catch up. She called Craddock, her voice firm. Lang's got a new parcel, Inspector. Check the cottage now. Craddock groaned. Jane, we're stretched thin, but I'll send a man. She hung up, her lips tight. Craddock was slow, but she wasn't. She walked to the village edge, her cane silent, staying off the main road. Willow Cottage loomed, its windows dark, but the shed door was ajar. She crept closer, her heart pounding, and peered inside. Empty. The crates were gone, the floor swept clean. Clever, she thought, but her eyes caught a scrap. Paper, torn with a French stamp. She pocketed it, a new thread. Back home she studied the scrap. It was part of a shipping label, faded but clear. Paris, Galerie Noire. She wrote it down, her mind ticking. Raymond had mentioned Paris dealers. The maestro's network was real, and St. Mary Mead was its hub for now. She called Raymond again, her voice quick. Check Galerie Noire, Paris. Art dealers tied to the maestro. He whistled. You're deep in this, Aunt Jane. I'll look. She hung up, her heart light. The web was unravelling, thread by thread. That afternoon Craddock called back. Cottage is clean, he said, frustrated. No crates, no Lang. But we found tyre tracks fresh, leading out of town. Miss Marple nodded. He's moving the goods, Inspector. Watch the roads. Craddock sighed. You're running this show, Jane, she chuckled. Just helping, dear. She hung up, her mind spinning. Lang was shifting the crates, but where? A buyer, maybe, or a new hideout. The maestro's plan was close to blooming, and she needed to cut it down. She visited the village green, where children played and gossips lingered. Tommy rode by, his basket full. Miss Marple, he called. Saw that Lang fellow with a van near the cottage. Looked heavy, like it was loaded. She smiled, her heart ticking. Thank you, Tommy. The van was the key. Lang was moving the crates, but not far. The maestro wouldn't leave his prizes unguarded. She wrote in her book, Van at cottage, crates moved not far, Galerie Noire link. That evening she sat with Dolly again, her tea cooling. Dolly was buzzing about the brooch, but Miss Marple steered her to Lang. He's busy, isn't he? She said, her voice light. Always coming and going. Dolly nodded. Saw him today near the church talking to a man in a cap. Looked sneaky. Miss Marple's heart jumped. A partner? She smiled, hiding it. Sneaky? Well, some folks are private. But her mind was racing. The man in the cap, seen at the fete, was back. Back home, she locked her door, her fire low. The village slept, but she didn't. She opened her book, writing, Lang with man in cap. Partner, crates in van nearby. Maestro's web tight, but breaking, She closed it, her heart steady. The notes, the scrap, the van, they were threads pulling her closer. Lang was the maestro's hand, vain or not, and he was slipping. She'd set no trap tonight. She'd watch, wait, and strike when the web was weak. Her needles clicked, the fire glowed, and outside the night hid a thief she'd soon snare. Chapter 7. The Final Gambit. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of Miss Jane Marple's cottage, casting delicate patterns on her kitchen table. She sat with a cup of tea, her little black book open, her sharp eyes tracing her latest notes. Victor Lang was slipping, his moves bolder but sloppier, and the maestro, likely Edward Vane, the disgraced aristocrat Sir Henry had named, was close. The crates at Willow Cottage were gone, moved by a van Tommy had seen, and a torn shipping label from Galerie Noire in Paris pointed to a smuggling network. 2 taunting notes had been slipped under her door, proof the maestro knew she was hunting him. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her heart steady. "You're nervous, Mr. Vane," she murmured, "and I'm closing in." Her traps at the vicarage had rattled Lang, but he'd escaped each time, a shadow too quick for Inspector Craddock's men. The stolen brooch, the crates, the notes, they were threads in a web, and she was pulling them tight. Raymond's latest call had brought a breakthrough. A secret auction of stolen treasures was planned in London, hosted by an unknown figure. Miss Marple's lips curved. The maestro wouldn't resist showing off his prizes. If she could get there, she'd see him, or Lang, in the open. "Your game's ending," she thought, tapping her pen, "and I'll be there to watch." She stood, her grey coat buttoned, her cane in hand. The village was waking, its streets humming with early chatter. She needed Craddock's help to infiltrate the auction, but first she'd check the village for signs of Lang. Her cane tapped as she walked to the post office, where Mrs. Price was sorting letters, her tongue as loose as ever. "Morning, Miss Marple," she called. No parcels for that Lang fellow today, but he was here yesterday, looking twitchy. Miss Marple smiled, buying stamps. Twitchy? Well, city folk are restless. But her mind filed it away. Lang was on edge, waiting for something. She moved to the green, where children played and gossips lingered. Tommy, the butcher's boy, rode by, his basket full. "Miss Marple," he shouted, "saw that van again, near the old mill road. Heavy, like before." Her heart ticked faster. The mill road was outside the village, a quiet spot for hiding crates. "Thank you, Tommy," she said, her smile warm. The van was key. Lang was stashing the goods nearby, ready for the auction. She needed to act fast. Back home she called Craddock, her voice firm. "Inspector, there's an auction in London, stolen goods. The maestro will be there or Lang. I need to go." Craddock groaned. "Jane, you're not a detective. It's dangerous." She chuckled, undeterred. "I'm just an old lady, Inspector. Who'd suspect me? Get me in, and I'll spot him." Craddock sighed, but she knew he'd bend. "I'll arrange it," he said. "But you stay with my men. No wandering." She promised, her fingers crossed. She'd do what she must. Craddock's plan came that afternoon. She'd pose as an aide to a wealthy collector, a cover that let her blend in. His team would be nearby, ready to move if she signalled. Miss Marple packed a small bag, her plain hat and coat perfect for the role. She wrote to Raymond, asking for last-minute details on the auction, and to Sir Henry, thanking him for the Von lead. "If it's him," she wrote, "I'll know." She locked her cottage and took the evening train to London, her heart racing but her face calm. The village faded behind her, but the maestro's shadow followed. London was loud, its streets packed with cars and crowds. Craddock met her at the station, his face tense. "Jane, this is mad," he said, leading her to a car. "The auction's in a private club, shady types only. If the maestro's there, he'll be armed." Miss Marple smiled, settling in the seat. "Then we'll be careful, dear." Craddock shook his head, but his eyes softened. "You're something else." He drove her to a hotel, where she changed into a borrowed dress, simple but elegant, and pinned her hair. She looked like any rich man's aide, not a village sleuth. The auction was in a dim, smoky room, its walls lined with velvet and gold. Men in suits and women in jewels filled the seats, their whispers sharp with greed. Miss Marple sat near the back, her fake glasses low, her notepad open. Craddock's men were outside, their radios silent. She scanned the crowd, her heart steady. Then she saw him. Lang, his tweed jacket gone, now in a sleek suit, his hair slicked back. He moved among the guests, shaking hands, his smile tight. "There you are," she thought, her pen pausing. Lang didn't see her. He was too busy, his eyes flicking to the stage, where a man in a black suit announced the first item. "A stolen vase, Chinese, centuries old." Bids flew, voices sharp. Miss Marple watched Lang, noting his glances at a side door, his fingers tapping, his glass. He was nervous, not in charge. "You're not the maestro," she thought. "You're his man." The next item was a painting, a Monet, reported stolen from a museum months ago. Her heart jumped. This was it, the maestro's prize. She leaned forward, her eyes on Lang. He slipped to the side door, speaking low to a man in a cap, the same cap Mrs. Baker had seen at the fete. Miss Marple's breath caught. A partner, just as she'd guessed. The man nodded, then vanished through the door. Lang returned to the crowd, his smile back, but his eyes were cold. She wrote in her notepad, "Lang with man in cap, side door, maestro close." The auction rolled on, each item a stolen treasure, each bid a knife in her heart. The maestro's web was vast, and she was in its heart. The Monet sold for millions, the room buzzing. Lang moved again, this time to the stage, whispering to the auctioneer. Miss Marple's heart ticked faster. He was orchestrating, but not leading. She needed to see the side door, where the real game was. She stood, her cane hidden under her coat, and slipped toward the back, her steps slow to avoid eyes. Craddock's. Men were outside, but she couldn't signal yet. She needed proof. The side door was guarded, a burly man in a suit blocking it. Miss Marple paused, pretending to adjust her glasses. Through a crack, she saw crates, her crates, from Willow Cottage, stacked high. Her heart leaped. The van, the mill road, the auction, it all fit. The maestro was selling his haul, and Lang was his front. She stepped back, her mind racing. She had to tell Craddock now. She moved to the main door, her hand brushing her notepad to signal Craddock's men. But Lang saw her. His eyes locked, on hers, his smile gone. For a moment the room faded, just them, hunter and hunted. Then he moved fast toward the side door. Miss Marple's heart pounded, but she stayed calm. She reached the exit, waving to Craddock's team, hidden in the alley. "He's running!" she hissed, pointing. The men surged, radios crackling. Lang hit the side door, triggering a hidden panel. It slid open, and he dove through the man, in the cap behind him. Craddock's men followed, shouting, but the panel slammed shut. Miss Marple stood in the alley, her breath short, her cane tight in her hand. Slippery, she thought, but her eyes were bright. She'd seen him, seen the crates, seen the truth. Lang wasn't the maestro, but he was close. And the maestro was here, somewhere. Craddock ran up, his face red. "Jane, you're mad! He's gone, through a tunnel or something." She nodded, her voice steady. "But we know his game, Inspector. The crates are inside, and he's selling them. Move now." Craddock swore, then barked orders. His men stormed the club, the auction dissolving into chaos. Guests screamed, jewels glinting as they fled. Miss Marple stayed put, her eyes on the side door. The crates were proof, enough to hurt the maestro, even if Lang had slipped away. Police found the crates, just as she'd seen, packed with stolen art. Paintings, statues, a gold chalice. Craddock's men sealed the room, their flashlights sweeping. "This is big, Jane," Craddock said, his voice tight. "The maestro's network, cracked open." She nodded, her heart steady. "But he's not caught, Inspector. Lang's his, man, not him. The maestro's still out there." Craddock stared. "You saw Lang?" She nodded, describing his suit, his moves, the man in the cap. "He's not the top," she said. "He's addicted to the chase, but someone's pulling the strings." They drove back to the hotel, Craddock's men guarding the crates. Miss Marple sat in the car, her notepad full, her mind spinning. The auction had been a gamble, and she'd won, but not enough. Lang was loose, and the maestro was hidden. She wrote in her book later, in her room, "Auction hit, crates found, Lang seen, escaped, man in cap, side door, maestro not Lang, vain." She closed it, her heart light. The web was breaking, thread by thread. She slept little, her mind on Lang's face, his cold eyes. He'd known her somehow at the auction. The notes under her door, the taunts, they were personal. Back in St. Mary Mead the next day, she locked her cottage tight, her fire low. The village was quiet, its gossips unaware of her London trip. She called Raymond, her voice quick. "The auction was his stage, dear. Lang ran, but the crates are ours. Check vein, urgent." Raymond whistled. "You're a marvel, Aunt Jane. I'll dig." Craddock called, his voice grim. "No sign of Lang, Jane. The tunnel led to a street, then nothing. But the crates are gold, stolen from museums, private homes. The maestro's hurting." Miss Marple smiled. "Good. Keep watching, Inspector. He'll move soon." She hung up, her heart steady. The auction had shaken the maestro's web, and Lang was on the run. She'd set no trap today. She'd wait, watch and strike when the time was right. That evening, she sat with Dolly Bantry, her tea cooling. Dolly was buzzing about the brooch, unaware of London. "Jane, any news on that thief?" Miss Marple smiled, her voice soft. "Oh, he's busy, Dolly, but he's not as clever as he thinks." Dolly laughed, but Miss Marple's eyes were distant. The maestro's game was big, but her gambit had hit hard. Lang was the key, and Vane was the lock. She'd turn it soon. Her needles clicked, the fire glowed, and outside the night hid a thief she'd catch in time. Chapter 8. The Maestro Unmasked. The morning mist clung to St. Mary Mead, softening the edges of its cottages and quiet streets. Miss Jane Marple sat by her kitchen window, a cup of tea cooling beside her little black book. The London auction had been a bold move, exposing Victor Lang and the maestro's stolen treasures, crates of art and gold from Willow Cottage now in police hands. But Lang had slipped away through a hidden tunnel, and the maestro, likely Edward Vane, remained a shadow. Miss Marple's sharp eyes traced her notes. "You're hurting, Mr. Vane," she murmured, "but you're not caught." Her heart ticked, steady. The game was nearly over, and she'd play the final move. The auction had confirmed Lang was the maestro's man, not the master himself. His nervous glances, his quick escape with the man in the cap, they showed a follower, not a leader. Sir Henry's letter had named Vane, a disgraced aristocrat turned thief, whose taunts and bold heists matched the notes under her door. "Clever, Miss Marple, and dig too deep, you'll fall." Lang's charm, his lockpick, his interest in Mrs. Clement's brooch, they fit Vane's style, but his youth didn't. "You're Vane's shadow," she thought, tapping her pen, "and I'll find him through you." She stood, her grey coat buttoned, her cane in hand. The village was stirring, shopkeepers opening shutters, children scampering to school. She needed to check for Lang's traces, but first she'd call Inspector Craddock. His men were combing London for Lang, but St. Mary Mead was where the maestro's web began. She walked to the vicarage, where the phone was private, her cane tapping softly. Mrs. Clement greeted her, still fretting over the brooch. "Jane, any news?" she asked, pouring tea. Miss Marple smiled. "Soon, dear. Thieves don't hide forever." Alone in the parlour, she dialed Craddock, her voice firm. "Inspector, anything on Lang?" Craddock's voice was rough, tired. "Nothing, Jane. He's a ghost. The crates are ours, though. Money, gold, all stolen. The maestro's network is cracking." She nodded, though he couldn't see. "Lang's back here, I'd bet. Watch the village roads and check for Edward. Vane, an old thief. It's him." Craddock paused. "Vane, that's a name from the files. I'll look. But stay safe, Jane. They know your trouble." She chuckled. "Trouble's my game, dear." Back home, she sat by the fire, her black book open. The notes, the crates, the auction, they were threads, and Vane was the knot. Lang's face at the auction, his cold eyes locking on hers, haunted her. He'd known her somehow, and that meant Vane did too. She wrote, "Lang not maestro, Vane is. Back in village, plan next." She closed the book, her mind racing. This maestro loved taunts, loved control. He'd strike again, here, to prove he could. The village was quiet, its gossips focused on the fate's leftovers and the vicar's sermon. Miss Marple walked to the post office, her eyes scanning for Lang or his van. Mrs. Price was sorting letters, her face bright. "Morning, Miss Marple. No parcels for that Lang fellow, but he was here, asking about express mail." Miss Marple's heart ticked faster. Express? In a rush, is he?" Mrs. Price nodded. Looked like he hadn't slept, all pale and jumpy. Miss Marple smiled, buying stamps. Moving's hard work. But her mind filed it. Lang was planning, and fast. She moved to the green, where Tommy, the butcher's boy, pedalled by. "Miss Marple," he called. "Saw that van again, Mill Road, last night. Had a man in a cap driving." Her heart jumped. The man in the cap, Lang's partner from the auction. "Thank you, Tommy," she said, her smile warm. The Mill Road was key, quiet, hidden, perfect for stashing goods. Lang hadn't left St. Mary Mead. He was regrouping, and Vane was close. She needed a final trap, one they couldn't dodge. Back home she called Raymond, her nephew, her voice quick. "Dear, anything on Vane or Galerie Noire?" Raymond's voice was tense. "Vane's a legend, Aunt Jane. Disgraced lord, stole millions, vanished after a heist in 15. Galerie Noire's his buyer, shady art dealers in Paris. Your crates were theirs." Miss Marple nodded, her heart light. "And Lang?" Raymond paused. "No record, but he fits Vane's type. Young, smooth, loyal. Watch out." She thanked him, her mind spinning. Vane was the maestro, Lang his tool, and the Mill Road was their hideout. She sat by the fire, her knitting untouched, piecing it together. The brooch was a test, the crates the prize, the notes a taunt. Vane's ego drove him, his need to outsmart everyone. Lang's youth, his nerves, his quick escapes, they screamed follower, not master. "You're here, Vane," she thought, "watching me." She needed to draw him out, make him think he'd won. A new rumour, like the manuscript, but bigger, bolder. Something he couldn't resist. She walked to Dolly Bantry's, her cane tapping, her plan forming. Over tea she dropped a hint, her voice casual. "Dolly, I heard the strangest thing. Priceless artefact, some old crown, they say, is passing through St. Mary Mead, stored at the vicarage for a collector. Top secret." Dolly's eyes widened, her cup clinking. "Jane, a crown? Here, I'll tell Arthur." Miss Marple smiled, hiding her spark. "Oh, it's probably nonsense. Keep it quiet." She knew Dolly wouldn't. The rumour would spread, a flame to draw Vane. She visited the post office next, mentioning the crown to Mrs. Price, her tone light. "Just gossip, dear, but imagine a treasure in our village." Mrs. Price gasped, already whispering to a customer. Miss Marple left, her heart steady. The bait was set. Vane or Lang would hear, and the Mill Road would show their hand. She called Craddock, her voice firm. "Inspector, spread word of a crown at the vicarage, priceless, lightly guarded. Watch the Mill Road, too. Lang's van is there." Craddock groaned. "Another trap, Jane. You'll get us killed." She chuckled. "Or catch a thief, dear." Craddock agreed, his men ready by dusk. Miss Marple stayed home, her fire low, her knitting in hand. She didn't need to be at the vicarage. Craddock's team was enough, and she'd done her part. The village was quiet, its lights dim, but she felt eyes watching. The clock ticked past midnight, her heart steady. Then a knock. Craddock, his face grim. "We got him, Jane." Lang, at the vicarage, dressed as a deliveryman. "Caught him red-handed, searching for your crown." Miss Marple's heart leapt, but her face stayed calm. "Lang? Alone?" Craddock nodded. "With the man in the cap, driving, the van, both in custody. The van's full, more crates, hidden on the mill road. She smiled, her eyes bright. And Vane? Craddock frowned. No sign, but Lang's talking. Says he works for a maestro, won't give a name. Miss Marple nodded, her mind racing. Lang wasn't Vane, but Vane was close, his web torn. She visited the station next morning, where Lang sat in a cell, his charm gone, his face pale. Craddock let her watch through a window, her cane silent. Lang's eyes met hers, cold but beaten. "Well played, old lady," he said, his voice low. Miss Marple smiled, her voice soft. "Good game, Mr. Lang." Craddock raised a brow. "You know him?" She shook her head. "Just his type, Inspector." But her mind was on Vane. Lang's prints, Craddock said, matched the fake manuscript from her first trap. "He's our thief," Craddock said, "but not the top." Back home, she sat by the fire, her black book open. The crates from the van held more art linked to Galerie Noire, and Lang's partner confessed to the brooch theft, a job for the boss. She wrote, "Lang caught, man in cap too. Crates found, Vane's plan broken. Maestro Schrachter Vane, still free." She closed the book, her heart steady. The auction, the notes, the traps, they'd led here. Vane was the maestro, and Lang his pawn. She'd missed him, but his web was in tatters. The village buzzed with news of the arrest, Mrs. Price spreading it like wildfire. Miss Marple stayed quiet, knitting at the vicarage, her smile polite. Mrs. Clement's brooch was found in the van, returned with tears of joy. "Jane, you're a miracle," she said. Miss Marple chuckled. "Just lucky, dear." But her eyes were distant on Vane. He'd vanished, like Sir Henry said, but he'd left tracks, Lang, the crates, the notes. She'd find him some day. Raymond called, his voice awed. "Aunt Jane, you caught him. Lang's all over the news." She smiled, her voice soft. "Not quite, dear. The big fish swam away." Raymond laughed. "You'll get him." She hung up, her heart light. Craddock visited, his face tired but warm. "Jane, you've done it. The maestro's network is down, thanks to you." She nodded, offering tea. "Not down, Inspector. Just dented. Vane's out there." Craddock sighed. "You never stop, do you?" She smiled. "Not till the puzzle's solved." That evening she sat with Dolly, her tea cooling. Dolly was buzzing about Lang's arrest, unaware of Miss Marple's role. "Jane, a thief in our village, like a book." Miss Marple smiled, her voice soft. "Life's stranger than books, Dolly." Her mind was on Vane, his ego bruised, his plans ruined. He'd taunt again somewhere, but she'd be ready. Her needles clicked, the fire glowed, and outside, the night hid a mastermind she'd chase another day. Chapter 9. The Village Restored. The morning sun bathed St. Mary Mead in a warm golden glow, chasing away the last wisps of dawn mist. Miss Jane Marple sat by her cottage window, her knitting needles clicking softly, a pale blue scarf growing in her lap. The village was calm again, its quiet rhythm restored after weeks of secrets and shadows. Victor Lang, the maestro's right-hand man, was in custody, caught red-handed at the vicarage with his partner, the man in the cap. The stolen crates, packed with art, gold, and Mrs. Clement's sapphire brooch, were safe with Inspector Craddock's team, and the maestro's smuggling web was in tatters. But Edward Vane, the true maestro, had slipped away, a ghost in the night. Miss Marple's sharp eyes scanned the street, her heart steady. "You're out there, Mr. Vane," she murmured, "but your game's done here." Her little black book lay closed on the table, its pages full of clues. The crates at Willow Cottage, the taunting notes under her door, the London auction, and Lang's final mistake. She'd unravelled the maestro's plan, piece by piece, with traps and whispers, outsmarting a thief who thought himself untouchable. Lang's cold eyes in the police cell, his grudging "well played, old lady," echoed in her mind. She smiled, her needles pausing. "Not so clever after all, Mr. Lang," she thought. But Vane's escape nagged her, a loose thread in a finished scarf. She'd find him some day. The village was buzzing, its gossips thrilled by Lang's arrest. Mrs. Price, the postmistress, spread the news like wildfire, her voice loud at the post office. "Caught at the vicarage, bold as brass," she told anyone who'd listen. Miss Marple heard it on her morning walk, her cane tapping the cobblestones, her grey coat neat. She nodded politely, letting the chatter flow, but her mind was elsewhere. The brooch was back with Mrs. Clement. The crates were evidence, and St. Mary Mead was safe for now. But Vane's shadow lingered, and she never ignored shadows. She stopped at the bakery, where Mrs. Baker was stacking loaves, her face bright. "Miss Marple, you heard? That Lang fellow's locked up, and the vicar's wife got her brooch." Miss Marple smiled, buying a roll. "Wonderful news, dear. The village is lucky." Mrs. Baker leaned in, her voice low. "They say he was part of a big gang, stealing all over. Imagine here." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Oh, trouble finds every place, but it never stays long." She left, her heart light. The village was healing, but she stayed watchful. Back home, she sat by the fire, her tea steaming. The London auction had been her boldest move, spotting Lang and the crates, though he'd escaped through a hidden tunnel. The police had seized the stolen treasures, Monet paintings, gold chalices, ancient statues, cracking the maestro's network. Craddock's call yesterday had been grim but hopeful. "Jane, we've got dealers in Paris and London talking, thanks to those crates. Gallery Noir's done, but Vane's a ghost, no trace." She'd nodded, her voice soft. "Ghosts leave footprints, Inspector. Keep looking." Her nephew, Raymond West, had called too, his voice full of awe. "Aunt Jane, you're in the papers. Village sleuth foils smugglers, they're saying." She chuckled, brushing it off. "Nonsense, dear. I just noticed things." But Raymond pressed. "Lang's talking, Aunt Jane. Says the maestro's a genius. Untouchable. Sounds like this Vane fellow you mentioned." Miss Marple's heart ticked faster. "Maybe, dear. Tell me if you hear more." She hung up, her mind spinning. Vane was untouchable for now, but no one stayed hidden forever. The village fete committee met that afternoon at the vicarage, planning a thank-you event for the brooch's return. Miss Marple joined, her knitting bag slung over her arm, her smile polite. Mrs. Clement was radiant, the sapphire pinned to her shawl, sparkling in the parlour's light. "Jane, it's a miracle," she said, pouring tea. "The police found it in that awful man's van." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes warm. "A blessing, dear. You must be so relieved." But her mind was on the van, parked on the mill road, full of Vane's treasures. Tommy's tip had sealed Lang's fate. Dolly Bantry was there, her voice loud with excitement. "Jane, it's like a story. A thief caught, jewels saved, all in St. Mary Mead." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her face calm. "Life's full of stories, Dolly. This one's done." Dolly leaned in, her eyes wide. "But they say the boss got away, some master crook. Is it true?" Miss Marple's lips twitched. "Gossip, dear. The police have it in hand." She changed the subject, asking about the Fates funds, but her mind was on Vane. He'd taunt again somewhere, and she'd be ready. The committee planned a village party, set for the weekend, with music and cakes to celebrate. Miss Marple offered to knit a prize for the raffle, her needles already busy. The talk turned to Lang, his charm now a scandal. "He fooled us all," Mrs. Price said, shaking her head, "smiling like a saint, stealing under our noses." Miss Marple listened, her eyes distant. Lang hadn't fooled her. His quick glances, his jumpy visits to the post office, his lockpick, they'd screamed thief. Vane was trickier, but she'd seen his type before. Ego always tripped them. Back home she checked her door for notes, her heart quickening. None today, but the memory of Vane's taunts. "Clever, Miss Marple, and dig too deep you'll fall," kept her sharp. She locked up tight, her fire low, and sat with her black book. She wrote, "Lang caught, brooch back, crates seized, Vane free but weak. Will he run or strike?" She closed it, her mind clear. The maestro's web was broken, but he'd weave another somewhere. She'd watch for it. The next day she walked to the green, where children played and dogs chased. Sticks. Tommy rode by, his grin wide. "Miss Marple, they're saying you helped catch that thief," she chuckled, waving him off. "Just stories, Tommy. Mind your deliveries." But her heart warmed. The village saw her as a sweet old lady, not a sleuth, and that was her strength. She'd used it to trap Lang, spreading rumours of manuscripts and crowns, drawing him out while Craddock's men waited. Vane was tougher, but her method would work again.